The Mark II Dacia Duster has been on sale for coming up to about 8 years now and has always had a bit of a reputation as being an unapologetically cheap, no-nonsense SUV aimed at the likes of the Peugeot 2008 and Vauxhall Crossland, and even bigger cars like the Kia Sportage and the Nissan Qashqai, doing everything that they can do but at a much lower price point. It was replaced by the Mark III towards the end of last year. But for those in the used market, you can pick up early examples, high mileage examples of this for about £6,500 to £7,000. But if you wanted, say, a late plate example with lower mileage, like this one, you could pick them up for about 15 grand. So the question has to be asked, is this still the great value proposition it was when it was new? Or have its rivals now caught up now that depreciation is kicked in? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Since this car was launched back in 2018, there's been 3 subtly different versions. Compared to this latter example, the originals had different headlamps and rear lights, different grille, the older style Dacia and Duster badging throughout, and a 7-inch display for the interior. In 2021, they introduced the first facelift, which gave the car Y-shaped LED daytime running lights to align the car more with the then new Sandero. Rear lights were also introduced, as well as an 8-inch display matching that as offered on the Sandero 2, with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Then, in 2023, Dacia introduced its new branding to the range, and with that we saw a new grille, badging, and a complete removal of any chrome. Which is exactly what we've got here. In fact, this car here is my dad's, and we bought it really as we needed a cheap workhorse for the family. And by being cheap, it kind of inadvertently became quite rugged. But there were other tricks that Dacia pulled off to make this car so cheap. Take the windscreen and the front doors, they're identical to that as what you would find on the Mark II Sandero, which was the current model at the time that the Duster was launched. At the rear lights are separated from the rear tailgate, which means they don't need wiring in. Again, saving money there. Take the platform. It was built on the B0 Plus platform, a long wheelbase version of what underpins the Mark III, Mark IV Clios and the original Nissan Juke. In fact, for some part of its life, it even shared engines with those cars. But we'll come to that shortly. The story very much continues on the inside. It borrows a lot of the switchgear from its parent company, Renault. But unlike Renault, this interior is very much function over form. You're not going to get fake carbon fibre inlays or mood lighting. What you get is a really functional dashboard that's made mostly of scratchy plastics, but they are properly solid scratchy plastics. This car is really well screwed together. In terms of its actual function though, things like the air conditioning, it's all done using dials and buttons. Everything isn't buried in the touchscreen. It does feature a touchscreen, however. Depending on the model you go for, if you go for the earlier ones, you got a 7-inch unit which looked aftermarket, whereas these newer ones have a more integrated 8-inch display, which features things such as DAB radio, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, as well as a rear camera, which, much like everything else that came out at its time, is absolute garbage, but you at least got rear sensors as well. Speaking of rear, thanks to its boxy proportions, I've got loads of space in the back here. The seat in front is set for my driving position, and I've got loads of knee room still, despite the fact that I'm 6 foot tall. It's also really airy in here. You've got nice light headlining, and this being a mid-spec Expression model, it also means I get electric windows in the rear and 2 USB charging ports. But in the boot, that's where things get really impressive. It's got a massive 445 litres of boot space. To put that into perspective, the Nissan Juke has 354 litres, a Seat Arona has 400, and a Peugeot 2008 has 410. In fact, the boot on this car is so big, Dacia even offered this car as a commercial version too. In terms of engine options, it very much did vary depending on the year in question. Initially, there was a 1.6 litre 4-cylinder naturally aspirated petrol engine, which produced 113 horsepower and did 0 to 62 in a smidge under 12 seconds, and was very much the sole petrol choice right up until the introduction of the 1 litre 3-cylinder turbo in 2019, which is what's fitted to this car here. It was less powerful compared to the outgoing 1.6 at just 90 horsepower, but there was also the introduction of a biofuel variant which allowed you to run the car on both petrol and LPG, and that had 100 horsepower. For those that wanted more grunt, however, there was also the introduction of the 1.3 litre turbocharged 3-cylinder engine. That had 130 horsepower when mated to a 6-speed manual gearbox, but if you went for the dual clutch automatic, you got an extra 20 horsepower up to 150 and allowed you to do 0 to 62 in 9.7 seconds. These engines, however, didn't get introduced until 2021, basically when this car had its first facelift. For those that want diesel, there was one option throughout its entire lifespan. That was a 1.5 litre DCI 4-cylinder engine, produced 115 horsepower and did 0 to 62 in a smidge over 10 seconds. In terms of fuel economy, all of the petrol engines could comfortably do over 40 to the gallon, with the diesel engine producing over 50, depending on whether you were looking at the NEDC test or the WLTP test, depending on when the car was tested. There was also the option of selectable 4-wheel drive. They did it on the petrols, but good luck finding one of those. The vast majority of them were diesels, and quite frankly, if you're going to be going onto the rough stuff, you're going to want the diesel engine. For those that would be looking for a petrol 4-wheel drive for peace of mind when weather conditions get a little bit adverse, I would recommend going with the 2-wheel drive variant. Enjoy the benefits that that provides in terms of cost savings and a bigger boot, and then just put on a decent set of winter tyres. You'll find that you get much better traction with those than you would a 4-wheel drive on summer tyres. Now, given the car's price point, you may expect the car to drive very much like this, or this, or perhaps even this. Truth be told, pretty unremarkable. That's a good thing. It grips well, there's a little bit of lean in the body, but nothing too drastic. I will say though, when you come out of a junction, you mash the throttle with a bit of lock on, the torque steer levels are bordering on laughable. The 1 litre engine that we've got in this, it performs really well. I'm not having to rev the nuts out of it to get any kind of performance. Obviously the 1.3 litre engine would be better, although I have heard some things about the 1.6 not being particularly gutsy. The brakes are progressive, the steering is light. The gearbox, it's not the snickiest gearbox in the world. It's certainly not on the levels of an MX-5, but then what is in this segment? I'd say it's probably no worse than a current generation Clio. I've certainly driven sloppier boxes. The ride's a bit jiggly, but certainly no worse than any other car built on a platform of this sort of age. And on a long journey, it's fine. I drove this from London to Liverpool for totally legitimate reasons, and I got out absolutely no problems whatsoever. Probably overshared there, didn't I? Now, when this car was new, it was thousands of pounds cheaper. And because it was straddling the B segment and C segment, in some extreme cases, it could be as much as 10 grand cheaper. But now that it's a used car and depreciation has kicked in, how does it compare to its rivals? Well, if you wanted to buy one like this, a mid-spec Expression with the entry-level 1 litre engine and about 25,000 miles on the clock, you'll be looking at spending about £13,500 to £14,000. But if you wanted all of the bells with all of the whistles, you'll struggle to spend over 20. So what does that kind of money get you with its competitors? Well, for £15,000, you've got the previous generation MG ZS, which will probably still have 4 or 5 years warranty left on it. But the 1.5 litre naturally aspirated engine is somewhat gutless, and the interior feels cheap without feeling particularly tough or rugged. Not to mention the infotainment feels like something Argos would put on one of its Bush branded smart TVs. If you want to go for something a little bit more tried and tested, there's the Hyundai Kona, which offers a 5-year warranty from new, and you could easily get a 3-year-old model with some of that left over. But it will be smaller inside compared to the Dacia, Much the same if you go for something like an Arona, Puma or any other B segment car. Expect a 22 or 23 plate car with similar mileage for that kind of money. Want something with a similar kind of space, and you're looking at anything from a 2019 to a 2021 for similar price and mileage. 20 grand with an auto will get you very much the same, albeit with better specs, but if you want something like a Qashqai or a T-Roc, expect to be looking for something around 2021 or something with bigger mileages. To conclude then, should you buy the Dacia Duster? Well, the short answer is yes. I love how honest this car is. The things it's designed to do, it does them incredibly well. And yes, it has some shortcomings, but it makes no apologies for those. It's comfortable, it's well equipped, it's cheap to run, and in the 2 years we've had it, trouble-free. But don't just take my word for it. You can read up about any other users' reviews and satisfaction surveys, and you'll see Dacia score incredibly highly on those. It's no wonder then that Dacia has some of the highest residual values on the market. If you're a family looking for a practical SUV, it's perfect. It will be super good for the kids in the back because as much as they try to wreck it, they won't. And even if they really go out their way to break something, parts are super cheap for it. And yes, you could go and buy something more premium, but you're going to either be paying more money, you're either going to give up some of that vital space, or you're going to be having to go for something much older. Really enjoyed my time with the Dacia Duster, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then be sure to give it a like and comment down below what you think of the Duster. Have you owned one, and what's your experience been like? And if you haven't bought one, why not? What did you go for? And of course, if you want to see more Dacia content, including the new Duster, and for those that need more space, the new Bigster, then be sure to click subscribe and click the bell icon so always get notified whenever new videos go live. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. My name's Max. This is the Mark II Dacia Duster. You've been watching Max Talks, and I'll see you on the next one.